Welcome to the Visually Hidden Selects podcast, where we discuss an independent approach to the art of cinema and explore the subtext of various featured films. My name is Peter O'Brien, and I am an independent filmmaker, author, and musician.
My name is David Bendler. I'm a film and stage actor and a pop culture enthusiast.
I'm Anne Milleville, a French screenwriter and producer.
This week's VHS selection is The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring from 2001, directed by Peter Jackson and starring everybody that I mentioned in the VHS video. If you have not seen Fellowship of the Ring, then please head over to the Visually Hidden YouTube channel, subscribe so you don't miss any future recommendations, check out the VHS video, watch the film, and then come on back to the podcast because we will be discussing it openly with spoilers. Here we go. Yeah, The Fellowship of the Ring. I remember when this film came out, and I was not really familiar with the books at the time. I remember I went to see Vanilla Sky, and that came out in December of 2001. And I remember leaving the theater and seeing all these people lined up, dressed as hobbits and all these characters. And I was like, what the heck is going on over there? What are they? Like, I had no idea what this was really about. Like, I was into film and everything, and I was into Peter Jackson, but I just had no idea because I'd never read it because I wasn't really into fantasy novels, especially at that time. I was more of a science fiction or a horror kind of a guy. And, you know, when you get into it, then you start to see the ripple effect and the influence of this story on all of that stuff. But at the time, I just remember thinking, like, what the heck? Fast forward to like 3 months later, I'm working at the movie theater and I'm doing my usher training. And so I go into the theater to clean it, and there's still like 10 minutes of the movie left. So I saw the ending of this film before I saw the film. And it was in those last 10 minutes, that scene with Frodo and Sam at the river there, and that just fucking sucked me right in. I was like, holy shit, this looks fucking amazing. And I haven't even seen the great stuff yet. Like, it was just that performance from Sean Astin, you know, like when he's like, I'm coming with you. Like, oh, going with him where? I want to go too. You know, like that he would like fucking drown himself, like with his determination and his loyalty. Like, holy shit. And then, you know, with the other three on the beach, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, like, you know, going to hunt some orc. It's like, I want to do that too. I don't even know what a fucking orc is at this point. I've never seen them, but I want to go too. The reading that Viggo gives in that scene, it's like, shit, I'm fucking missing something huge here. Like the next day when I was not working, I went and saw the film, and oh my God, that echoes in my mind now to this very like moment. There aren't very many films that have affected me and been with me and sustained the way this film and this series has. You know, it's right up there with the original Star Wars trilogy insofar as its resonance in story, in presentation, in everything. All of the filmmaking elements just really come together in this particular film and series in a way that it doesn't always do. By the time this film came out on DVD, I was reading this book, and it was just a lot of fun to like see all the special features, but then also like, you know, the book is almost a special feature at that point because there's so much more in the book than there is on the screen.
Yeah, the first time I watched The Lord of the Rings was in theater. I was 14 years old. And at that time, I didn't go much to theaters. So it was really an event just going to theater for me. And I went there because my best friend of that time, she read the books and she told me it's something you need to know. If you don't want to read the book, come to see the film with me. So I said, okay. And yeah, of course, I was blown away by the story, by the actors, by everything. I fell in love for Aragorn. And she was completely in love with Legolas. We even bought teddy bears, one called Viggo and one called Orlando, just after the movie. We were teenagers, you know, so. And so, yeah, it was something that really marked my adolescence and even my young adult life, because when I was in high school, I decided to read the books. As you said, you have more information in the books. So read The Hobbit first and then The Lord of the Rings, because it's the way it goes, right? And yeah, definitely one of my favorite movies of all time.
The funny thing about this movie for me is, I have an ability to remember every movie I've seen in the theater and the theater I saw it in. I cannot for the life of me remember if I saw this in the theater. I know when I first saw this movie, I was blown away by it, man. I mean, it was so good. It's all the things you hope for in a movie that's like this, like fantastical world, but it had such weight and gravity to it, and it felt serious at the same time. So as fun and as magical and as thrilling with the adventure aspect of it, it still felt like it was the most serious thing in the world. And I'm always compelled by those types of things. Like, I don't like when things take themselves too seriously, but I feel like when something has a serious tone underlined in it, it just gives the whole thing weight. And this thing was awesome.
And it's so bizarre. I remember when I went to go see it actually after that initial like preview of the ending, I went to go see it. I'm sitting in the theater and there's this shot when Gandalf first comes into the Hobbit hole and it's like his POV in the camera. I was like, that's totally a Peter Jackson shot. Wow, yeah, like it really is that guy who made those fucking insane movies in the 80s and 90s. This is amazing. Like that he went from Bad Taste, Meet the Feebles, Brain Dead, and Dead Alive, as you remember from last Shocktober, to Lord of the Rings. It's like one end of the spectrum to the other. But at the same time, when you look at those early Peter Jackson films, you can see this was the guy. You know, he had the imagination, he had the background in practical effects. And then as you see his filmography grow with films like Heavenly Creatures and The Frighteners, it's all leading up to Lord of the Rings, which is like, wow. And the fact that nobody else wanted to ever make this movie just blows my mind.
Well, it's like I said, it's awesome. It's massive. It's a massive undertaking. The love and dedication that this guy had for this material is why it's so successful. Because someone could have made this movie. Anybody could have made this movie. But it wouldn't have been what it ended up being. I think it would have been, a frail version of this, an anemic version of this. You could have glossed over a lot of things, kept it very streamlined, forced some characters out. And like I said, I can't compare it to the books. I haven't read them. But good portion of this man's life has been dedicated to this work, and it shows. That's why it's successful, and that's why it's enduring. But especially, I think, like you had said in the VHS, this one, all three movies are great, but this one, there's something about this one that's really, really good.
Yeah, this one for me is the heart of the story, so that's why it's so important. You can see that this guy is really committed to the story. The fact that it's entirely shot in New Zealand is also something, I guess, important for him. And talking about Peter Jackson, maybe I'm not the right person to do so, because to be frank, the only other movie I know from him is Dead Alive, that I know thanks to you, Pete. And I was really surprised when we watched Dead Alive, because I knew that Peter Jackson was the guy who did The Lord of the Rings, which is one of my favorite trilogies. So I was really surprised. But now I think that you can relate also on the empathy you can have with the characters. Because in Dead Alive, what I liked is the protagonist, you can have an empathy for him. And that's exactly what you have in those three movies. When Gandalf is worried about something, you don't know why he's worried, but you feel kind of worried also because this guy is worried. You know what I'm saying? And that's the same for quite every character in the movie. So that's something that he's really good at.
Peter Jackson was trying to make a fantasy film after, I think, Heavenly Creatures. He was starting to develop it, and everything he was doing was becoming derivative of Lord of the Rings. So then he looked into it and he saw that nobody was pursuing this story as a film. And so then he started working on that, and he pitched it everywhere. And the only place that was interested in making a Lord of the Rings movie was Harvey Weinstein at Miramax. But that bonehead, in his infinite wisdom, wanted to make it one movie. They did all this development and they tried crushing this massive story into one movie, and it was just imploding on itself. And so then the project went into turnaround, which, if you don't know what turnaround is, it's when basically somebody else has the option to purchase the property. The people who are pursuing it are no longer really interested, so it has like a small window to get rescued by another studio or another investor or another whoever. And Peter Jackson called up his friend at New Line who had just done The Frighteners, and he knew he was a Lord of the Rings fan. And he's like, well, shit, why don't we just make 3 movies and do it right? So so they moved over to New Line, and I think Harvey Weinstein's name is still listed among the executive producers, I believe, because he had it written into the contract because of all the development that went on over at Miramax for this project.
I even heard that Harvey Weinstein threatened Peter Jackson to replace him with Tarantino. I don't know if it's true, but imagine The Lord of the Rings made by Tarantino instead.
Only if
Crazy.
Samuel Jackson's going to be Gandalf.
You know how they do those Funny or Die or those like fake trailers or whatever, like Quentin Tarantino's like Lord of the Rings? That would be a really funny little short.
Indeed.
Yeah, and again, the other side of Peter Jackson in his filmmaking is his wife, Fran Walsh. They write their scripts together, and they have from very early on. I mean, she co-wrote Brain Dead, Dead Alive with him, and they did Heavenly Creatures, and then after The Lord of the Rings and King Kong, they did The Lovely Bones. And it's not just the Peter Jackson show, I guess, is the point that I'm getting at. It's like, yes, he's the director and he's a co-writer, co-adapter of this material, but there's a lot of people involved, even from the writing side. It was Fran Walsh and Philippa Boyens worked on all 3 films and the adaptation of them. I think one of the big strengths of Lord of the Rings is the accessibility of it, is like how anybody can sit down and watch this movie and enjoy it and get pulled into it. Like I said, like I saw the ending of it and I was like sucked right in. And when you read the books, sometimes, yeah, it'll bog you down with all of the details, and it'll give you descriptions, to the end of days. And it's like, I just want to get to the adventure. And with the film, you can see all that instantly in a frame. You can see the hobbit hole. You can see the characters. You don't need the paragraphs of description. It's beautifully written, and it's, if reading's your thing, it's a great read, but not everybody feels that way. But everybody can sit down and look at an image, and a moving image is even more engaging because then now you're following it through this world. And so that's where I think this film also just really succeeds. It's just a great medium to showcase this, and that the technology had caught up with the imagination in the story is just perfect timing.
The accessibility for me also comes from the fact that it's a note to friendship, to companionship, to solidarity, and that's something that really speaks to the audience anyway. And the fact that the theme is related to war, it talks to us, even if it's in a fantasy world, it sounds so real. I think people can definitely relate to it. And also the fact that visually it looks so great. You start the story with the Shire. You really want to live there. And then you hear the hobbits very excited to move to the elves. So you really want to see this world. You really want to discover all of it. And you're never disappointed because the quality on the screen, for all the virtual stuff done on computer are really great. Especially when you think it was made in 2001.
I know that when they were filming this movie, they were still developing some of the technology to achieve their visual goals. For example, in this film, in Fellowship of the Ring, the Balrog, which is the creature, the fire creature that Gandalf fights in the Mines of Moria, they had no idea exactly how they were going to do it. They were actually writing the code to do the digital fire visual effects while they were making this movie. And so by the time they were filming it, they didn't know how the Balrog was actually going to turn out until like maybe a year or more later, when they finally cracked the digital code to make that fire effect look legitimate on screen. And so this film, it started filming on October 11th, 1999. The first shot was the ring wraith hanging over the hobbits there. And from there, the last film comes out in December of 2003. So within 4 years, they completed this project. And that's just amazing. Like when you go back and you look at the scope and everything that's involved and everything that was before and everything that was after. I mean, October 99, I think the biggest technical achievement as far as like visual effects, digital effects, CGI was probably episode 1, which was kind of a little overdone in some regards. This film took that as a stepping stone and then applied it to its tangible approach, because they still utilized a lot of makeup. They still utilized a lot of props and all of the armor and everything. Like the orcs, everything in the third act of this film when they're running through the forest, like those are all real people in costumes. And that's where this film, I think, exceeds, is in that tangibility and that realistic approach, you know, and it looks real. Like the shadows and the light and the environment and the characters and the actors are all there. You know, you can actually reach out and touch it. Like Viggo Mortensen was really fighting that guy in the Urukai costume at the end. Like he's really fighting that thing.
I love this part.
When I saw that part, I was so worried for all the characters involved in that orc scene. This movie has you on the edge of your seat for like more times than I care to be involved in. I was genuinely worried about the characters multiple times throughout this film. But like you said, that seeing that guy snarling and fucking stuff dripping off of him, just being gross, and like that inevitability that like evil is rising and slowly like taking over their world. It's menacing.
I go back to the Balrog scene. That was really kind of a turning point in the film and in the story. And when you see that sequence, you know, like Gandalf knows, you can just see, like, forget Ian McKellen. Ian McKellen doesn't exist anymore. Gandalf the Grey is the man, and he's in this scene, and you can just see in his eyes when they hear the sound all the way the other end of the mine, and you see like this little flicker of light. You see it in his eyes. He knows what's coming. Nobody else knows. But because Gandalf is your guy, he's with you from the beginning. He takes you on this adventure, right? You know, like, shit's about to go down. And that scene where he's fighting the Balrog, like on the bridge, when he falls into shadow and he tells him, like, fly, you fools, and he just drops, everybody's reaction on the screen is mirrored in the audience at that point. Like, it was horrible. It was like the worst possible thing I could ever imagine happening in this film. And there's still more movie to come.
About halfway.
And so you hear that yell that Elijah Wood emits where he's like, no, like you feel that come up from like somewhere deep in that kid. And then when Gandalf drops, you can see it in Aragorn's face. It's like, I'm the leader now. That's it. I have to see this through. It's like his first step to becoming the king that returns. No more Gandalf the Grey. I'm the guy now. And he just sees like, shit, all this responsibility and weight falls on his shoulders. And you see it in that look. It's fucking amazing. And this is part of the brilliance of Viggo Mortensen in this film.
Man, the first time I saw that, and the bridge breaks and the beast falls, I'm like, oh, they dodged a bullet there. And then when he falls, like heart ripped out, you know, I was like, oh, like the air just left the room. I was like, what the fuck? It's so impactful.
The craziness of this scene is that every time I watch it, because the first time we watched it, Steve, we didn't know about the story, because you said that you didn't read the book and I didn't at that time.
Right.
So we didn't know that he will come back. But even now, I know what's going to happen. I know he's going to come back. But every time I cry, and the power of it, probably it's the music also. The music when they get out and you have the face of Frodo outside and the music, you cry. I mean, the tissue box is over, you know. And every time you listen to the music of this film, you know it's from The Lord of the Rings. It's really forever. You're gonna remember this music.
I agree with you. I mean, every time you see it, it's just as impactful. Maybe slightly less, because the first time is always the first time, and that's how you know it's great. Yeah. You know, Lord of the Rings, 23 years later, it still gets you. And that's how you know it's connected to something on a very human level, even though these are hobbits and dwarfs and whatever. There's the humanistic aspect of it, and that's what connects.
You both kind of tied it together there in a bow, because prior to Gandalf falling, it's this big, like heavy, you know, piece of the score. And then once he drops, it just becomes that one vocal performance. It's like all the music drops out and it's just the emotion. If you watch the movie and you see Pippin outside crying his eyes out, like curled up in a ball, that's me. Every single time I watch that scene, all the sound goes away, and it's just that one performance of emotion from the vocalist, just like pulling your heart out slowly.
Yeah. What I love about the score is it's beautiful, has that mystical quality of another world. It's also frightening at moments. There's tension. It has all the elements of a really great score. Like when we talk about score, this is a score. You know, some scores are less and just it's a little bit of music here and there, but this is like a functioning part of it's like a character, and it's very, very impressive and memorable.
I don't know if you know that Howard Shore, the guy who made the music for The Lord of the Rings, also made the music for Mrs. Doubtfire. I was surprised to read that.
What Howard Shore did in this, in my opinion, like he could just leave his car at the red light, you know, like he doesn't need to do anything else ever again because he did The Lord of the Rings. I mean, I'm thankful that he continues to work and he does great scores. He's kind of like Hans Zimmer, where he just has this widespread approach and appeal where he's almost like a musical chameleon. You know, he really knows what he's doing, and that's why he can adapt into all these different styles and stories. Whereas like some people are just good at like this kind of thing or that kind of thing, or I only do the action movies. Whereas Howard Shore, he's one of those guys who can cast a wide net and pull you in. And now a word from our sponsor.
This podcast is brought to you by Visually Hidden Selects. If you're looking for a spoiler-free recommendation of a classic film with professional analysis and insight, check out Visually Hidden Selects, exclusively on the Visually Hidden YouTube channel.
I think a big part of the success is the casting things appropriately. And I think what helped it was that they cast really good actors, solid actors, but they weren't at that stratospheric level of Hollywood where it detracted. So it's almost like you could appreciate these characters from that standpoint also. Like there was no baggage. That to me also lends a bit of accessibility. It's like, oh yeah, I know Elijah Wood. He's done a bunch of things as a kid, but it wasn't like he had this one role that was so overshadowing that people couldn't see him as anything else. And I think that really lent itself to almost like a clean slate with these characters, and people could go in and it just that stuff, it just worked. And you get people like Orlando Bloom, fairly unknown. I haven't seen all of his work, but out of all the work of his I have seen, this is my favorite. And he's one of my favorite characters in the film.
Gandalf is my favorite character, but when it comes right down to it, Viggo Mortensen, he's the one that really like sunk the hook in, simply because of like how well he's underplaying it. You know, he's never going over the top. A lot of it is in his eyes and in his face, in his demeanor, you know, and when he's introduced, I didn't read the book. I didn't know who Aragorn was. I didn't know who Strider was. He's introduced and he's very mysterious. And I'm almost like, at that point, I remember being like, oh shit, these four little hobbits have to like deal with this guy. What if he's with the ring wraiths? You know, it's like, you don't know unless you've read it. And so that first time, like, it was just so well executed. His character's introduction and how quickly he wins you over is really a testament to the character, to the writing, and to the performance. And he has some very, very key moments in this film that stand out. Of course, his introduction, but when he fights the wraiths off on Weathertop, that's one. Two, I think, is when he assumes responsibility of the Fellowship, when Gandalf falls into shadow. And my third favorite, the thing that chokes me up every time I watch it, is when he says goodbye to Frodo at the end. He's offered the ring and he folds his hands back and he takes them away so delicately. And then he turns on a dime and goes and fights the entire orc army by himself because he doesn't know that Legolas and Gimli are coming. He doesn't know where Boromir is. All he did was find Frodo and send him on his way, and now he's just stepping to like 100 fucking monsters with one sword.
He's awesome in this film, and what sells it for him is he plays it with an earnest quality. He's a guy who renounces his claim to the throne. And I always say it's the people who don't want power are the ones that should be leaders, and the ones who crave it should not have it. And I think he epitomizes that sentiment in this film. So because he's so honest about his motivations, he's immediately likable. And it doesn't hurt that he's handsome, right, Anne?
He's the sexiest one in the movie for sure. I'm totally in love with this guy. I'm still looking for my Aragorn in the real life. But Viggo Mortensen is a fabulous actor. He can play anything in any language. That's really impressive. He is the only one to have a romantic moments in the movies also. So I think that's why women love him so much. But yeah, he's definitely the one. And I love the
time for the ladies.
And I love the relationship he has with every character. You feel like he can understand any of them with Gandalf, you see the respect he can have. And as you said, Pete, he feels like becoming the leader when Gandalf falls down. Aragorn has really something special with every character, and that's why he's so special.
I think to add on to that, he has an optimism and a never say die attitude. Like he's never giving
Never
up.
quit. Yeah.
Ever. He'll die
Mhm.
on any hill and any day, because if it's the right thing to do, then we have to keep pushing forward. He has respect for everybody, no matter stature or state or size or age or whatever. That's another one of his qualities that makes him a great leader. And I love his arc over the 3 movies, because you see him, I don't want the power. Then he deals with the king, who the king is reluctant to do certain things at certain times. And he's like, no, we have to do this. And it's like he's doing the job he doesn't want to do, but it's inevitability. It's one of those fixed points in time where he has to be the king, and he accepts it. And the funny thing is, like, he doesn't want it for, all his personal reasons, but at the same time, you can't deny that that's where you're going.
There's an inherent nobility in the character that you can see just even the way he carries himself. But because of the life that he has chosen to lead, he has this humbleness and this humility that carries with him forward. And because even after all of that, he knows it still comes down to this one little hobbit with this one little fucking trinket. And like, that's what everything is riding on. The smallest possible item that one could possess, a ring that fits on your finger. And he's willing to like go into damnation to see that it's done properly and that it's taken care of. Like, wow.
His hopefulness and his optimism and his determination, I think, is infectious. And that's why I love the Gimli-Legolas dynamic, because there's 2 creatures from their respective worlds who have an animosity towards each other for historical reasons, but then they find this brotherhood inside the fellowship. I don't think we get there without Aragorn being the leader that he is, even though he doesn't want to be. But watching those 2 characters become the best of friends is one of my favorite things about the entire trilogy. At every moment of every one of those movies, all 3 of those guys are willing to die for the other one. And that's massive. And at a moment's notice. This is not a knock on any of the actors, the characters, but I feel like this is the one film where everyone is kind of on the same level. I feel like they all had to bring that A game. But that's why it's hard sometimes picking, like, because now talking about Aragorn, I'm like, man, he really is a great character. And not that I didn't think he was prior to this conversation, but it's just like when you start really dissecting them, they're all really at a certain level, which is a very, very impressive thing to do with a cast this large.
Personally, there is one character that is the weakest one, but maybe it's my affection for Aragorn that speaks. I don't know, but Liv Tyler, I'm not a huge fan of her performance in this movie. I think she's quite expressionless, and she doesn't have many scenes, but yeah, I'm not really impressed about her performance. That's the only character I can complain about, but it's not the character. I like the character. It's just the performance.
I was just going to say the one character that always kind of stuck out to me or performance was Liv Tyler, because honestly, like, I would not have like seen her in this kind of film or this kind of role, prior to this. I mean, her biggest film prior to this was Empire Records, like 6 years earlier, and then she was in Armageddon or something. Like, she wasn't,
I was skeptical.
I was tremendously skeptical of Liv Tyler being in this film, but I feel like she definitely, maybe it's a twinge of jealousy there on your part. And
maybe
you don't get to be held by Aragorn in the Rivendell moonlight. I don't know. I thought she really rose to the occasion. And I thought, insofar as like playing an elf, because, you look at Cate Blanchett too. She's also, all the elves are kind of expressionless because they have this arrogance about them, and they're
almost Vulcan-like.
Yeah. And it's not even an arrogance so much as it is like an inherent wisdom, because they are immortal. They've seen it all. What's going to impress them? What's going to scare them? What's going to do? When you've seen it all, you really do kind of like break down a little bit emotionally. Like, only Elrond is really reactionary because he was there 3,000 years ago. He saw it when men failed, so he has a chip on his shoulder for like this shit finally coming back around in his fucking lifetime.
Yeah, that's part of the elf's personality. So I kind of agree with you. But if you compare with Kate Blanchett, for example, two women, not many scenes, so we can compare both of them. We understand that Galadriel, she has two personalities. I mean, not two personalities, but she has two sides of her personality, because when she welcomes them, she's like, wow, she's fantastic. And then when she talks to Frodo about the ring, and you see that she could be attracted by the power of it, you see that there is an acting behind it. I'm not saying that Liv Tyler is not a good actress. That's really not what I'm saying. It's just that in that movie, you don't really see what she's capable of. That's the thing. I feel that Arwen, she's not that complex in the film. You understand what she wants is to be with Aragorn, which I totally understand. But except that, she has no purpose in life. I mean, yeah, I feel she's the weakest character. I'm sorry to tell you that, but Aragorn, if you're listening to me, I'm available.
But Sam Wise is the heart, I think, of the film.
Oh, yeah. He's kind of actually the hero of the film.
Definitely.
Yeah, watching it this time, he kind of like Frodo don't get there without Sam.
No.
Really, truly doesn't get there without Sam.
No, Sam is really the hero in disguise. He's masquerading as the sidekick, but when you get right down to it, when you watch the whole series or read the whole series, Sam is the hero. And I think that's another kind of like just beautiful little twist of this story and of this film.
The most badass gardener in Middle-earth.
Well, you want to talk about like the most unassuming of characters.
Right. In a group of characters, the hobbits, who are already unassuming.
Yeah, who knows the exact limits of his world when he says, like, if I take one more step, this will be the farthest I've ever been. It's like he's the most reluctant hero among the group. But he's the one who carries the ring for Frodo, who knows that Gollum's, up to no good, who gets Frodo up the mountain.
Sean Astin's so good in this movie.
Sam is the man.
It can't be understated how good he is in this movie.
He's good to begin with, but in this film, he was just given the right opportunity at the right time, because right before this, I think he did like a B movie with Bruce Campbell. He was going into
straight
that
to video land,
C-list straight to video realm, and then he just got The Lord of the Rings, and it gave him like a resurgence where it's like, okay, yeah, now he's back in the game and he's getting opportunities again. And now at this point, he's like a legacy actor. So, good thing that they cast Sean Astin to save this movie.
Who's in the toilet and he just dragged it up. But but yeah, he really is like the heart and soul of this tale, I think.
But yeah, I mean, top to bottom, the featured cast, the entire fellowship, from Viggo to Sean Bean, and then the supporting cast from Christopher Lee to Ian Holm, it's so bulletproof. It's ridiculous. There really is no weak link. Even Liv Tyler, I don't think so. Like, I'm gonna defend her honor here. I'm gonna become the Aragorn of this conversation here. And Liv Tyler, I think, really, she does what she needs to, and she's beautiful while doing it, and she just nails the part of the elf princess, I think.
Well, you just mentioned Sean Bean. What a tragic and great character. You saw the corruption of the ring. You saw it become his downfall. You see it, and then when it happens, like when he's going after Frodo, you're like, oh fuck no, you can't be doing that, pal. But then when like you see it like kind of blow up in his face, and he realizes he's got to do the right thing, and it's too late. It's tragic. So we think as an audience we lose Gandalf, and then we lose him. It's like, fuck, this thing is falling apart. The wheels are coming off.
What I said at the beginning, that the fact that you really have empathy for characters in this movie, and Boromir is the best example. As you said, you kind of hate him when he has his moment with Frodo, and the next minute you're crying because he just passed away. And also the fact that you have so much affection for characters in this movie, even if you don't see them a lot, because Jan Holm, the guy who plays Bilbo, it's kind of the same. You don't really see him much in the movie, but you have so much affection when he leaves. You want him to stay in the adventure. And that's something I really liked about this movie. And maybe that's a special touch of Peter Jackson, because that's what I said about Dead Alive. You had really empathy for the protagonist, and I feel that's the same with any character in The Lord of the Rings. Even if it's just for a few scenes, you have affection for them.
Boromir specifically is a very interesting character because Boromir is the only actual representative of the race of men, and it's the race of men who failed. Like, you can see his instant desire for the ring, you know, and he's the only one who comes on like really, really strongly with it. And that ties back into the ring wraiths, who are all 9 kings. They're all 9 men. 9 rings were given to the race of men, and those are the ring wraiths. And so it just ties into that theme of corruption and corruption of one's soul or morals or character. And Boromir, he's a great representative of that theme, and then how he comes back around and he does have his moment of redemption. It's like once the ring is like out of the picture, like then you get to see the real Boromir. And in the subsequent films, in the sequels, he has these flashback scenes to his character, and so you can see the dynamic of him even after he's gone, which is great. Even Merry and Pippin, you know, they start off as the comic relief, but then their characters, they all have an arc that changes over the course of the series, and even over the course of the film. Merry a little bit stronger than Pippin in this film because he's the one who gets Frodo to Bree, you know, on the Buckleberry Ferry, and he's the one who sees like Frodo's leaving. Like, we have to be a decoy now. We have to go lead the orcs away so Frodo can escape. Like, that's one of the things about this story. One of the themes is like anybody can rise to an occasion. Anybody can change given the circumstances for good or bad, and anybody has it within them to make a difference.
I agree. You know, the one character we forgot to talk about? The Ring. The Ring, I feel like the way they shot it, the sound design when it falls to the floor, the thump, that ring felt heavy. You know what I mean? When I'm watching that ring on screen, it feels heavy. It feels heavy in their hand, not just like in the sense of metaphorically on their souls or the burden, but it feels like there's weight. Like when it's in Frodo's pocket or in Bilbo's pocket, it's heavy. And it's like, that's such an impressive thing to do with, like you said, one of the tiniest, lightest little objects in the world. The gravity that ring holds and the way they shot it, unbelievable.
The ring is Sauron. It's all of his malice, all of his hate, everything he poured into it. Like that is him. And when you hear the ring talk, like that's Sauron's voice, it's his other part. And so when they come together, that's where you get the embodiment of it. But that's basically, his soul. And it's trying to keep the key away from the lock. You know, like Bilbo has it and he slips it on and disappears. And isn't that, you know, fun and whimsical. But when it hits the ground and then Gandalf approaches it with caution, and right before he's about to touch it, he gets the flash of the eye and he's like, I'm not touching that fucking thing. And he refuses to, because the second he touches it, it's game over, and he knows it. You know, that's why he won't take it from Frodo. You know, you cannot offer me this ring. And even when he offers it to Gladriel, and she like has that whole thing about I could be a queen. And she refuses it, and Aragorn too. He refuses it. It's like it's a very difficult thing to walk away from.
I just found it always so impressive because I felt like Peter Jackson treated it like a human character in the film, and the way everyone responded to it, interacted with it, or didn't interact with it. It's so well done because even when we know, like we saw Elijah Wood stick it in his pocket, right? I still know it's in there. Like I'm still thinking about it. It's not like it was a prop he put away and then, okay, we're going to keep on going with the story. It's ever present. And even little gestures like when someone looks at him wrong and he just puts his hand over the little pocket. It's just like the fucking thing is in there. It's like a living, breathing organism. And it's very impressive that they accomplished that.
Yeah, it's ever present.
And it has a purpose. The ring wants to go back to Sauron, so that's typical of a character. That's why you're right. It's definitely a character. It has interaction with other characters and has a purpose, so that makes sense.
The legacy of this is still felt, like Game of Thrones, that Viking show, you know, not the exact same thing, but the feel, the texture, those things would not be popular.
Yeah.
You know, there would be no world. I mean, and George R.R. Martin clearly is influenced by Tolkien. So it's like, you don't get to that side of things unless you take these stepping stones. And when I think about Lord of the Rings and this trilogy and when they came out, for me, there's still this prestige around these films. There is this aura around these films. It was so powerful when they came out. And anytime anyone mentions them still, it still has this unwavering like aura is basically the best word I can think of, but it's just ever present. And it seems to, like you said, after 23 years, that also has not faded away. The quality of the films stand the test of time, but that mystique of them is still right there. It's never gone.
That will about do it for us here today at the Visually Hidden Selects podcast. We will be discussing a completely different film next time, so be sure to head over to our YouTube channel and subscribe so you don't miss any future recommendations. You can catch Stephen Bendler on Instagram over at Steve's Pop Culture Corner. Anne and I, of course, are also on Instagram as well as Letterboxd, so you can follow us over there and find out what we've been watching and see what we think. And until next time, fly, you fools! But the thing I love the most about this movie has to be Viggo Mortensen, honestly.